Welcome to this explainer. We're jumping straight into the deep end today with a genuinely fascinating esoteric text from 1908 called the Kybalion. But look, we're not going to get bogged down in abstract mysticism here. Instead, we're strictly pulling from the source material to find actual, practical ways to take control of our emotional states, like today. So whether you've been studying ancient philosophy for years or you're just hunting for a fresh mental framework, you are going to find these century-old concepts incredibly relevant. Let's get into it.
Okay, check out this opening thought from the text. The lips of wisdom are closed, except to the ears of understanding. It's mysterious, right? But it perfectly sets the stage for a philosophy that was supposedly passed down in secret from the ancient master Hermes Trismegistus. The authors of our source material, who literally just call themselves the Three Initiates, insist these teachings are meant only for those ready to hear them. So if you're tuned in and focused right now, well, those closed lips are about to open for you.
Here's our roadmap for this explainer. First, the ancient master key. Second, the universe is mental. Third, the art of mental alchemy. Fourth, the principle of polarity. Fifth, shifting your mindset daily. And finally, number 6, mastering your own mind. Basically, we're moving from ancient mysteries straight into a rock-solid toolkit you can use every single day.
Starting with Section 1, the ancient master key. Let's see what exactly this thing is meant to unlock.
The text actually frames this ancient wisdom not as some rigid religion you have to blindly follow, but as a super practical mental instrument. Think of it as a tool to pry open the heavy doors of the unknown. The Kybalion basically argues that we get stuck in life because we just don't understand the universal laws at play. This master key isn't there to build you a whole new temple of knowledge. It's literally just there to help you freely open the doors of the one you're already standing in. All right, moving to Section 2. The universe is mental. Let's unpack how this forms the absolute bedrock of the whole philosophy.
So, the Kybalion rests entirely on these 7 hermetic principles. You've got mentalism, correspondence, vibration, polarity, rhythm, cause and effect, and gender. The text claims these are the immutable laws governing literally everything, from how planets orbit to the random thoughts bouncing around your head. But since we're zeroing in on mindset today, we absolutely have to focus on the very first one on this list.
The all is mind. The universe is mental. This is the principle of mentalism, and it is a massive concept. The text is arguing that everything we experience, matter, energy, life itself, is, at its core, a mental creation existing within what it calls the infinite mind. And I mean, think about the implications there. If the universe is fundamentally mental in its nature, then it totally stands to reason that if you understand the mental laws, you can actually change your physical experience of the universe.
And knowing that the universe is fundamentally mental brings us right to Section 3, the art of mental alchemy.
When you hear alchemy, you probably picture some ancient wizard trying to turn a chunk of physical lead into literal gold, right? Well, according to the Kybalion, true alchemy is actually mental transmutation. It's the art of changing your mental vibrations. Just like a chemist can change the state of physical matter, melting ice into water, the mental alchemist changes the state of their own mind. And by doing that, they potentially change the environment around them, simply by understanding the nuts and bolts of how thought actually works.
But to actually pull off this mental alchemy, we have to look at Section 4, the principle of polarity.
The principle states, everything is dual. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. This is where the Kybalion gets incredibly practical for us. It tells us that these huge paradoxes in our lives can actually be reconciled. Why? Because things that seem completely diametrically opposed are really just two ends of the exact same pole. Let's look at how the source illustrates this, because it's super clever. Just picture a standard thermometer. Where exactly does heat stop and cold start? There's no absolute hot or absolute cold in the universe. There are literally just varying degrees of thermal vibration. What we call cold is just our everyday word for a lower rate of heat vibration. They are the exact same thing, just sitting at different degrees on the same scale.
Now, let's bump that up from the physical to the mental plane. The Kybalion argues that love and hate aren't these two completely alien concepts. They are the exact same emotion, just vibrating at different degrees of polarity. You've got degrees of hate, degrees of love, and then that sort of fuzzy neutral middle ground of simple likes and dislikes. Because they live on the exact same scale, the text says a mental alchemist can literally grab the slider of their consciousness and move it up or down that line.
And this right here is where the framework becomes a total game changer. Take fear and courage. Because they're on the exact same scale, the source claims you can't just magically turn fear into something completely unrelated, like the color red or physical heat. But you can absolutely transmute fear into courage by sliding it up the scale. So let's say you're absolutely terrified before a massive presentation at work. Don't try to force yourself to be calm. Calmness belongs on a totally different scale. Instead, you take that intense, fearful energy and transmute it directly into intense, courageous energy. You literally just push the slider up.
Which naturally leads us to Section 5, shifting your mindset daily. How do we actually do this today, while sitting on your commute or at your desk? Okay, here is the concrete hermetic formula. Step 1, identify your current negative mental state. Let's say you're feeling incredibly anxious. Step 2, do not dwell on the anxiety. Instead, focus entirely on its polar opposite, confidence. And step 3, use your willpower to lock onto that higher vibration, which slides the scale and flips your polarity. You're basically starving the negative pole of your attention and completely feeding the positive one.
For example, let's say it's Monday morning. Your alarm just went off and you are feeling so incredibly sluggish and unmotivated. According to the text, the worst thing you can do is fight the slothfulness directly. Fighting it keeps your attention trapped at the bottom of the scale, right on that low vibration. Instead, you focus 100% of your energy on activity, on being vibrant and alive. By fixing your mind solely on the high end of that specific pole, your mental vibration naturally gets pulled upward. Boom! You are literally performing mental transmutation.
And that brings us to our final section, number 6, mastering your own mind. Because what actually happens when you start practicing this every day?
Well, under the principle of cause and effect, the text says most people are simply pawns. They're just carried along by outside forces, right? By their environment, the doom scrolling on the news, the demands of everyone around them, and their own totally unchecked moods. But a hermetic master learns to rise above all of that. By taking control of their own polarity, they become the ones moving the pieces. They dictate their internal environment, which, as the text argues, ultimately goes on to shape their external reality.
And this reveals a really crucial distinction. The quote says, "Transmutation, not presumptuous denial, is the weapon of the master." The truly wise don't just stick their heads in the sand, ignore their problems, or practice that kind of toxic positivity where you just pretend reality isn't happening. No, they use these higher mental laws to overcome the lower physical laws. They consciously shift their reality through deliberate action and transmutation. They don't just sit there denying that it's cold out, they actively generate heat.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I really want you to think about where your own mental pendulum is swinging today. When you hit a stressful situation later this afternoon, and you probably will, are you going to let the environment dictate your polarity? Or are you ready to grab this ancient master key, slide your own mental scale, and consciously choose courage over fear and action over sloth? Ask yourself, on the chessboard of life, are you a mover or are you just a pawn?